Alien Girl watched the human stand firm against the gale. His reason for staying shifted her heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The wind hit Ethan Cole like a moving wall, a roaring force that pressed against his chest and tried to tear the breath from his lungs. The high plains of Ares, 9 stretched in every direction, washed in pale blue light as gust after gust slammed into the weather tower he fought to stabilize. Dust lifted in sharp waves, stinging his face, clinging to the seams of his jacket. Sensors blinked red across the panel strapped to his arm, their warnings lost beneath the howl of a gale strong enough to bend steel. Ethan planted his boots deeper into the rocky ground, every muscle trembling as he braced against the shuddering tower. The cables vibrated like guitar strings about to snap, each tremor echoing into his bones. The storm wasn't just bad, it was the kind that erased landmarks, flipped transport rigs, and turned loose debris into airborne hazards. And yet he stayed. He stayed because the settlement down the ridge depended on this tower to detect wind shifts before they turned deadly. Without it, families wouldn't know when to take shelter. Kids playing near the turbine fields wouldn't hear the alert that told them to run inside. That thought alone anchored Ethan more firmly than the safety harness clipped to his belt. Somewhere behind him, the wind shifted pitch, just enough to make him look back. Through the blur of dust, he caught movement. A silhouette standing where no one should be during a storm like this. Kayla RHYSS watched him from the lee of a jagged stone outcrop, her cerulean skin catching thin ribbons of light breaking through the storm. Her silver-bright eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in something closer to disbelief. She had seen humans before, but none who would willingly stand exposed in winds that her people respected like a living force. Ethan didn't notice the way she studied him, the way her head tilted slightly as he reset his grip on the tower, refusing to yield to the storm's pressure. His breath came short. His shoulders shook. Still he stayed. A sharp gust crashed into him, pushing him a step sideways. He recovered, leaning in, refusing to release the stabilizer bar. From her shelter, Kayla's fingers twitched, a subtle sign of worry among her kind. She didn't understand him, this human who fought against something even the Ventari would avoid. And she didn't understand why she felt a pressure in her chest as she watched him. Another blast of wind struck, and Ethan gritted his teeth, whispering under his breath, barely audible over the storm's cry. Just hold. Just a little longer. Kayla heard only the determination, not the words, and something inside her shifted, quiet but real, like the first small bend of a branch before a thaw. The gale screamed on. Ethan stood firm. The gale finally eased just enough for Ethan to pull his hands away from the trembling stabilizer bar. His arms felt heavy, almost buzzing from the constant pressure, and the air tasted of cold minerals and dust. He steadied his breath, scanning the tower's readings as they flickered from red to a cautious amber. It would hold, at least for now. A soft shift in the wind made him glance toward the rock outcrop. Kayla was no longer just observing him from afar. She stepped out into the open, though the wind still tugged at her pale blue cloak. Her movements were quiet, almost gliding, as if she felt the air differently than he did. Ethan blinked away grit and offered a faint smile. "You should not be out here," he called over the wind. She tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes reflecting the storm light. "You stayed," she replied, her voice clear despite the distance between them. "Why would I leave while something important is still standing?" Ethan said, patting the tower's metal casing. "These alerts give people time to get indoors. That is worth a few bruises." She frowned at the unfamiliar word, then seemed to understand from his tone. "My people would have retreated before the storm reached this strength," she said. "We are taught that resisting the wind only exhausts the one who tries." Ethan shrugged, adjusting the strap of his gear pack. "Sometimes, staying put does more good than running." Kayla stepped closer, stopping only a few feet from him. Up close, her skin shimmered faintly, picking up the storm's muted glow. Ethan tried not to stare, but there was something calming about the soft light around her even as the air trembled with leftover gusts. "Your body is not built for these winds," she said quietly. "And yet you stood in them." Ethan chuckled under his breath. "I work on old wind farms back on Earth. Once you get tossed around a few times, you learn to plant your feet better." Her eyes widened a little, as if trying to imagine a world where humans worked with storms by choice. Another gust rolled across the ridge, and Kayla reacted instinctively. She lifted one hand, creating a subtle pocket of calmer air around them. Ethan felt the difference immediately, the pressure easing off his shoulders. "How did you do that?" he asked. "We Vantari sense patterns in the wind," she explained. "We cannot control it, but we can guide it a little. Enough to keep you steady." Ethan nodded, grateful for the relief. "Thank you." Kayla hesitated, then asked, "Was it truly for those children in the settlement that you stayed?" Ethan checked the scanner strapped to his wrist. The readings were stabilizing. "Yes, they rely on this tower. If they get the alert late, they cannot reach safety in time. It is that simple." Kayla studied him, as if searching for any hint of exaggeration or pride. She found none. The wind brushed past them again, gentler this time, carrying a tone closer to a sigh than a roar. "Humans confuse me," she murmured. "You risk yourselves for reasons that are small, yet meaningful." Ethan looked at her with softened eyes. Protecting someone is never small. Kayla did not respond right away. The storm continued to settle around them, but her expression carried its own quiet shift, as though something inside her had leaned toward him without her noticing. "The storm is not finished," she said softly. "There will be another wave. You cannot remain exposed for the next surge." Ethan glanced at the darkening horizon. She was right. "Then we should find cover," he said. Kayla nodded, turning toward the shelter in the rocks. But before stepping forward, she looked back at him once more. "Ethan Cole," she said, her voice almost thoughtful. "The wind is not the only thing that changed here today." He followed her toward the rocks, unaware that she walked a little closer now, as if the space between them belonged to neither the storm nor the sky anymore. The shallow shelter carved into the ridge offered only a narrow slice of calm, just enough for Ethan to catch his breath while the next surge built across the horizon. The air inside the rock alcove felt cooler, carrying the scent of mineral dust and faint ozone. Ethan brushed grit from his jacket and checked the scanner again, watching the wind markers climb in slow, steady pulses. The storm was gathering strength exactly as Kayla had warned. She stood near the entrance, her silhouette outlined by the shifting light. The wind tugged at the ends of her cloak, but she did not seem bothered. Instead, she watched the horizon with an almost instinctive understanding, as if she could read the sky in ways he never could. "The second wave will come soon," she said softly. "It will be stronger than before." Ethan nodded, leaning back against the stone. "Stronger I can handle. I just need the tower to survive long enough for the system to send updates." Kayla turned toward him, silver eyes focusing with quiet intensity. "Why does this matter so much to you? You risked yourself for people you do not even know." Ethan tightened the strap of his scanner before answering. "Where I grew up, storms took things fast. Power lines, homes, sometimes lives. Early warnings make all the difference. If I can help give someone a few extra minutes to get indoors, I will do it every time." She studied him with a look that felt almost like a question directed inward rather than at him. The wind outside deepened into a low hum, vibrating through the stone floor. Kayla moved a little closer, her steps quiet. "Humans speak of storms as if they are enemies," she murmured. "But my people believe the wind carries memory. It tests us, shapes us, pushes us toward who we should become." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe that is exactly what is happening right now." Kayla blinked at that, as if the thought had not occurred to her. Before she could respond, a gust struck the rock face outside, sending loose dust swirling through the opening. Kayla raised her hand instinctively. The air shifted. Ethan felt a soft pressure surround them. The wind redirected just enough to keep the debris from blowing in. "I will never get used to that," he said quietly. "It is not control," she replied. "It is listening. The wind moves, and I answer." Ethan pushed off the wall and stepped closer to the alcove entrance. The sky beyond had darkened to a muted violet, streaked with rolling currents of dust. "We will need to move soon," he said. "The tower is holding, but I want to check it before the next gust front hits." Kayla stepped beside him, close enough that he felt the faint warmth radiating from her skin despite the cool air. "You should let me guide you," she said. "The wind will be unpredictable. Alone, you could be caught off balance." Ethan met her gaze. "I trust your judgment." Her expression softened, a delicate shift that seemed almost reluctant. She looked away briefly, as if adjusting to the meaning of his words. "Then stay near me when we walk," she said. "The air favors those who understand its rhythm." He nodded. Together they stepped out of the shelter as the storm gathered its breath again. For a moment, the wind eased around them, shaped by Kayla's subtle guidance. Ethan steadied himself, and Kayla glanced at him with a quiet certainty he had not seen before. Something had changed in the space between them, a small but undeniable shift carried on the wind itself. The wind pressed against them the moment they stepped out of the alcove, but it no longer felt wild or disoriented. Kayla walked half a step ahead, her movements steady and deliberate, guiding the air around them with subtle shifts of her shoulders and hands. Ethan felt the pressure ease just enough to let him move without stumbling. The sky above flickered with muted streaks of pale violet, the signature tint of Ares' storms gathering momentum. Ethan scanned the tower from a distance. Its structure leaned slightly more than before, but it still held firm against the rolling gusts. The settlement down the ridge depended on those readings, and Ethan felt the familiar pull of responsibility tighten in his chest. "It is still intact," he said. "That is good." "For now," Kayla replied. "But the next pulse will test every joint in that frame." Her tone held no judgment, only a quiet acknowledgement of truth. They reached the base of the tower, and Ethan knelt to check the lower stabilizers. Dust swirled around his boots, lifted by shifting wind currents that reacted to Kayla's presence. She stood nearby, her eyes following the subtle patterns in the air, adjusting her stance with gentle precision. "You truly understand the wind," Ethan said as he tightened a bolt. "It listens to you." "It does not listen," she corrected softly. "It simply recognizes intention. The air moves toward balance. When I offer it a calmer path, it chooses that path." Ethan looked up at her. "I wish storms back home worked like that." Kayla allowed the faintest smile, brief but warm. "Perhaps they do, but in ways humans are not taught to see." Another gust swept over the ridge, stronger than the last. Ethan braced instinctively. Kayla stepped closer, raising her hand slightly. The air thickened into a protective buffer that softened the gust's push. Ethan exhaled in relief. "I would be on the ground without you," he said. "You would stand again," Kayla replied. "You have a way of rising against whatever pushes you." Her voice held an unexpected softness that made Ethan pause. He tightened the last bolt and stood, brushing dust from his gloves. "The tower should hold through this next wave," he said. "If the sensors stay online, the alerts will go out in time." Kayla looked toward the distant settlement, her expression shifting to something contemplative. "Children live there," she said quietly. "You care for them as if they were your own." "Someone always has to look out for the kids," Ethan replied. "Storms do not wait for anyone." She considered that, her gaze lingering on him as if weighing the meaning behind his words. "Your people place value on small lives," she said. "On lives that contribute little in return. It is unusual." Ethan smiled faintly. "Kids are not supposed to contribute. They are supposed to grow." Kayla lowered her eyes, a quiet thought flickering behind them. "Your way of seeing the world is different," she murmured. "It shifts what I thought I understood." Before Ethan could respond, the air changed. A low vibration rippled across the ridge, rolling through the ground beneath their feet. Kayla lifted her face toward the sky. "The second wave is coming," she said. "We should return to shelter." "Lead the way," Ethan replied. They moved together toward the alcove, the wind pressing but never overwhelming. Kayla shaped the air with graceful precision, and Ethan matched her pace, trusting her instinct more than the readings on his scanner. As they reached the shelter, the ridge darkened under the weight of the approaching gust front. Ethan glanced at Kayla. "Thank you," he said, "for guiding me." She met his gaze, her silver eyes steady. "The wind reveals the truth of those who walk in it. Today, it showed me something I did not expect." The storm gathered its breath again, and the space between them settled into a new, quiet understanding carried on the shifting air. The second wave struck the ridge with a deep resonance, a sound that rolled through the stone like a distant drum. Ethan felt the vibration in his boots before the wind even reached them. Inside the narrow alcove, dust trembled along the walls, and the air thickened with the pressure of the growing gust front. Kayla stood near the entrance, watching the horizon with the quiet focus of someone reading a language only she understood. Her silver eyes reflected the shifting sky as if catching hidden currents the way a compass catches magnetic lines. Ethan steadied himself against the rock. "How long will this one last?" he asked. "Long enough to test your tower," Kayla replied. "And perhaps longer than you would hope." Ethan exhaled slowly. Figures. The storm swelled, pressing into the ridge in heavy pulses. Yet inside the alcove, Kayla shaped the air with gentle movements, guiding the worst of the gusts away from them. Ethan noticed how her breathing synced with the rhythm of the wind, her shoulders rising and falling with a calm that did not match the wildness outside. For a moment, the noise softened, giving them a pocket of quiet. "I have been thinking," Kayla said, her voice barely above the hum of the storm. "Humans choose to face storms directly. Ventari do not. We adapt, we shift, we avoid. But you stand." Ethan offered a small smile. "Sometimes standing is the only thing that makes sense. Even when it hurts you?" "Especially then," he replied. "That is when people need someone steady." Kayla turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "On my world, individuals are valued by their contribution to the winds. Those who cannot navigate them are often left behind. It is not cruel by intention, but by tradition." Ethan frowned gently. "Left behind? Even if they are young?" Kayla hesitated, then answered with a quiet honesty. "Yes." Ethan looked toward the storm-dark settlement far below the ridge. "That is why I stay on days like this. Everyone deserves a chance to make it home." Something softened in Kayla's posture. She leaned slightly closer, as if trying to understand a warmth she had never encountered before. "You speak as though you have carried storms before," she said. Ethan nodded, eyes drifting to the swirling dust outside. "Back on Earth, storms were unpredictable. I lost a friend when I was younger because the alert came too late. After that, I decided I would never let something fail on my watch if I could help it." Kayla absorbed his words slowly, as if each piece connected to something within her that she had long ignored. The wind rose again, rattling the mouth of the alcove, but she did not look away from him. "That is why you stood against the first wave," she murmured. "It was not pride. It was memory." Ethan nodded once. "Pretty much." Another gust hit the ridge, a powerful one that sent dust sweeping past the entrance. Kayla responded instinctively, lifting her hand to redirect the burst of air. Ethan watched her with quiet admiration. "You saved me out there," he said. Kayla's eyes flickered with surprise. "The air simply chose the calmer path." "You helped it choose," Ethan replied. "That counts." She looked down for a moment, her voice softening. "The wind tests what is within us. Perhaps today it tested me as much as it tested you." Ethan offered her a steady, reassuring smile. Then we passed together. The storm roared on, but in the small space between them, something gentler settled, like the first hint of clear air after a long, restless front. The ridge trembled as the storm settled into a long, steady rotation, the kind that did not roar but pressed in with a constant weight. Ethan listened to the low hum vibrating through the stone walls of the alcove, a reminder that the next shift in wind direction could come without warning. The scanner on his wrist pulsed with soft alerts, each one marking a slight change in pressure. Kayla stood near the entrance again, her gaze fixed on the sky. Her posture was still, but Ethan sensed the tension in the air around her, like threads pulled tight. "Something is different," she murmured. Ethan stepped beside her. "Different how?" "The wind is trying to decide its path," she said. "It carries two intentions at once. It wants to rise, but it also wants to sweep across the ridge. When it hesitates like this, the world becomes uncertain." Ethan looked out over the plain, where faint spirals of dust rose and dissolved. "Uncertain is not good for the tower," he said, "or for the settlement." Kayla turned her head slightly, studying his expression. "You worry for them even now." "Of course I do," Ethan replied. "If the wind shifts suddenly, they will get almost no warning." Kayla stepped deeper into the alcove, the wind tugging at her cloak as if reluctant to let her go. "In my culture," she said, "storms are seen as lessons. The wind teaches us who we are. It shows us our limits." Ethan leaned against the stone. And what is it teaching you right now? Kayla hesitated. The hum of the storm filled the quiet, but she did not look away. It is teaching me that I have misunderstood humans. I believed your people were careless with danger. Yet you stand in it not out of recklessness, but out of care. Ethan offered a faint, warm smile. I am not special. Plenty of humans would do the same. Perhaps, she said softly, but not many would stay for strangers. The storm pulsed again, a deep, rolling sound that shook a thin veil of dust from the alcove ceiling. Ethan checked his scanner as the readings spiked. That is the pressure front, he said. If it shifts east, the tower is safe. If it shifts west, the settlement will be in its path, Kayla finished. Ethan nodded. And they will need to know 5 minutes ahead, not 5 seconds. Kayla stepped closer, her expression tightening in thought. Ethan, there is something you do not understand about the Ventari. He raised his brows slightly. What is that? We do not interfere with the natural direction of storms, she said. We observe. We learn. But we never alter what the wind decides. Ethan paused before answering. I am not asking you to alter anything. I just need to understand it. If you can read the wind better then. The sensors, your insight could save lives. She held his gaze for a long moment, the air shifting subtly between them. To guide the wind is forbidden, she whispered. To speak its path aloud is discouraged. But to allow it to harm without cause, she trailed off, conflicted. Ethan softened his voice. Kayla, helping is not the same as controlling. If you can sense something before the storm acts, that is not interference. That is compassion. Her eyes searched his, looking for something steady to anchor to. The storm rumbled again, and the scanner blinked red. Kayla drew a slow breath. The front will shift west, she said quietly. The settlement is in danger. Ethan straightened. Then we warn them now. Kayla nodded, a quiet resolve settling in her expression. I will help you. Just this once. Once is enough, Ethan said. And for the first time since the storm began, Kayla stepped fully into his side of the alcove, choosing a path against her tradition because a human had shown her a different way to stand in the wind. I warn them, Kayla said, her voice steady despite the storm vibrating through the ridge. But you must reach the tower panel. The broadcast will not trigger without manual override. Ethan tightened the strap of his gear pack, already stepping toward the mouth of the alcove. The wind outside pulsed with renewed force, carrying the heavy, swirling scent of dust and static. Then we move now, he said. Kayla followed, her cloak lifting in the rising current. As they emerged from the shelter, the world felt sharper, more urgent. The storm had shifted its shape, the air bending westward in long, sweeping arcs. Dust spirals climbed into the sky like ghostly pillars, and the plain below blurred into a churning haze. Ethan braced against the pressure, but Kayla lifted her hand, creating a pocket of calmer air that allowed them to move between gusts. Her steps were fluid, guided by instinct, while Ethan trusted her lead completely. Stay close, she said. The wind is uncertain. It may strike from any direction. Ethan nodded, matching her pace. They crossed the ridge carefully, boots grinding into loose gravel that shifted under each step. The tower stood ahead of them, its metal frame trembling under the rising pressure. If it takes a direct hit, the system may shut down, Ethan said. We cannot let that happen. Not before the alert goes out. Kayla's silver eyes flicked toward the horizon. The front is almost upon us. You will have very little time. Time is all I need, Ethan replied. They reached the tower's base, and Ethan dropped to one knee, accessing the control panel. Cold wind rushed past his neck as he entered the override sequence. The interface flickered, struggling against the environmental interference. Come on, he muttered. Stay online. Kayla stood protectively beside him, guiding air currents around the tower to reduce the strain. She moved her hands with careful precision, her breath steady as she coaxed the wind away from the exposed wiring. It is listening, she whispered, but it fights the pull of the front. Ethan glanced up briefly. Keep doing whatever that is. It is working. The panel beeped sharply. Ethan's fingers flew across the keypad, initiating the warning broadcast to the settlement. The tower lights blinked from amber to green as the automated system came to life. A soft chime confirmed the transmission had begun. Relief washed through him for a moment, but Kayla did not relax. Ethan, she said, her voice tightening. The wind is changing again. Before he could respond, A powerful shift surged across the ridge. The gust struck with a sweeping force that Ethan instantly felt. He gripped the tower frame to stay upright, boots sliding against loose gravel. Kayla moved toward him instinctively, shaping the air to ease the pressure, but the wind resisted her guidance. "It is too strong," she said. "The front is confused." The ground shuddered. Ethan's scanner beeped frantically. The storm was collapsing inward, redirecting its energy in unpredictable directions. Kayla stepped closer, her presence offering him steady balance. "The alert is sent," she said. "They will have time to reach shelter." "Good," Ethan replied, breath unsteady. "Then we just need to make sure we do not get swept off this ridge." Kayla's eyes met his, filled with a new, anchored resolve. "You carried your storm," she said. "Now let me carry mine." She extended her hands, guiding the air with deliberate care. Ethan felt the pressure lighten around them, the wind bending just enough to let him regain his footing. The ridge vibrated under the force of the shifting currents, but the space around them held together, shaped by her determination. In that moment, standing against a storm neither could control alone, Ethan understood how far she had stepped from tradition. And Kayla understood why humans stayed when the wind demanded they run. The storm's collapse did not break into chaos all at once. It folded inward slowly, like a massive tide pulling back before a greater surge. Ethan felt the pressure in his ears shift, a deep and steady drop that made the air around them feel thinner. Kayla closed her eyes, sensing more than he ever could, the wind's uncertainty brushing against her like a question. "It is choosing a new direction," she said quietly. "But it hesitates. That hesitation is dangerous." Ethan tightened his grip on the tower frame, every instinct telling him to brace. "How long do we have?" "Moments," Kayla replied. "Perhaps less." The wind fell silent for a heartbeat. No roar, no push, no distant hum. Just a stillness so complete that Ethan imagined the entire ridge holding its breath. Kayla opened her eyes. "There," she whispered. A new current swept across the ridge, colder and heavier, cutting in from the north. It collided with the westward surge she had predicted, creating a twisting seam of unstable air. Dust spiraled upward, then outward, forming a jagged current that whipped across the ridge like a giant turning its gaze. Ethan steadied himself, but the unexpected force knocked him off balance. He caught the side of the tower just in time. Kayla reached him instantly, shaping the air with both hands. "Stay with me," she said. "The wind listens when we move together." Ethan moved closer, trusting her guidance as the currents twisted around them. The gusts pushed and pulled, but whenever Kayla shifted her stance, the pressure eased slightly, creating enough space for him to find firm footing again. "You are doing more than reading the wind," Ethan said, raising his voice over the rising pulse. "You are protecting us." Kayla did not look at him, though her voice softened. "I was taught that the wind must never be guided. But today it does not feel like defiance. It feels like clarity." The ridge trembled again. The storm's opposing currents struck the tower with uneven force, causing the metal frame to vibrate. Ethan checked the connection lines. "If the tower loses its footing, it will not transmit the next update," he warned. "We need it to stay upright just a little longer." Kayla stepped forward, lifting both arms, her palms open. For a moment, the wind slowed, as if curious. "I cannot force it," she whispered. "But I can ask." Ethan watched her, awestruck despite the danger. Her movements were not commanding, but deliberate and graceful, following the rhythm of the shifting air. The gust struck again, but this time they curved, sliding past the tower instead of hitting it directly. Ethan felt the pressure lift. "You are doing it," he said. "You are actually doing it." Kayla exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. "The wind wishes to move freely. I am only reminding it that not all paths must be harsh." Ethan stared at her with a mix of admiration and disbelief. "Kayla, you could save so many lives with this ability." She lowered her hands, the gentle buffer she had created holding for a few precious seconds. "It is forbidden," she said quietly. "Ventari are taught that guiding the air invites consequence. The wind remembers those who shape it." "And what happens to them?" Ethan asked. Kayla looked down, her expression clouded by something deeper than fear. "They become marked by the storm. The sky itself does not forget." Ethan stepped closer, meeting her eyes. If helping people marks you, then let the storm remember you for something good. Kayla's gaze softened, something shifting inside her like a door opening to a light she had not expected. You speak as though courage is as common as breath, she said. For humans, maybe it is. Ethan smiled faintly. Not always. But today it is for me. And I think it is for you too. The wind swelled again, but this time, through Kayla's quiet guidance, it bent away from the ridge, giving them room to stand without strain. She looked toward the horizon, then back at Ethan with a new resolve in her voice. Very well, she said. Let the sky remember me. But it will remember you also. Because today, you taught me that standing is another way of listening. The storm gathered its final breath, but Kayla stood calm beside him, and Ethan felt the balance between them, formed not by strength alone, but by the shared understanding carried on the wind between two very different worlds. The final surge of the storm rose across the plains like a vast breath drawn in by the sky itself. Ethan felt the pressure shift once more, a deep and resonant pulse that signaled the end of the storm struggle. The opposing currents that had threatened to tear the ridge apart began to unwind, softening at the edges. Kayla watched the movement with calm focus, her hands still lifted slightly, as though listening for a final change in the air. The wind brushed past them in long, declining waves. It is releasing its hold, she said softly. The storm has chosen its path. Ethan steadied himself, scanning the ridge and the tower. Is it over? Nearly, Kayla replied. The last breath of a storm is the quietest. It leaves not with force, but with memory. Ethan let out a slow exhale. The tower stabilizers no longer shuddered. The warning system had transmitted the alert. Families down the ridge would now be safely underground. A sense of relief washed through him, gentle but powerful. Kayla lowered her hands, the subtle glow around her fading as the current settled. The wind eased into a steady, manageable breeze. She stepped closer to Ethan, her expression softer than he had ever seen. You stayed, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Even when the sky warned you to flee. Ethan smiled faintly. Someone had to make sure the alert went out. She held his gaze for a long moment, as if trying to understand something that could not be measured in wind currents or storm trajectories. Ethan, she murmured, you taught me something my people forgot long ago. That standing for others is not defiance. It is purpose. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle into the quiet space between them. And you taught me something too, he said. That storms can be read, understood, and even softened by those who listen instead of fight. Kayla looked out across the ridge. The sky was clearing, revealing streaks of warm light breaking through the dissipating haze. Dust settled in shimmering waves along the plain below. When I guided the wind, she confessed, I felt the sky mark me, not as punishment, but as recognition. Ethan tilted his head. Recognition? Yes, she said. It knows I chose a new path. A path shaped by compassion, not tradition. Ethan stepped beside her. Then it seems the storm was not the only thing that changed direction today. She turned toward him slowly. Her silver eyes reflected the brightening sky. But her expression held something deeper, something newly certain. Ethan Cole, she said quietly, when I first saw you stand against the gale, I believed you foolish. I thought you did not understand the danger. But now I see your reason. You stayed because someone needed you to. Not for glory, not for pride, but for kindness. Ethan felt the breeze brush gently across his face, no longer harsh or biting, but warm and deliberate, like a soft acknowledgement. Kindness matters, he said, even in storms. Especially in storms, Kayla replied. The ridge fell into a calm that felt more profound than silence. The wind drifted around them without urgency, carrying no threat, only the quiet after a long battle. Kayla stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could see the faint shimmer of storm light still lingering on her skin. She placed a hand lightly on his arm, a gesture small but filled with meaning in her culture. The wind remembers those who stand, she said. And today it reminded me that humans stand for reasons that reshape the heart. Ethan held her gaze as the last of the storm faded completely, leaving only the echo of their shared moment. In the stillness, neither spoke. They did not need to. The sky, now open and clear, carried the unspoken truth between them. The storm had passed, but what it changed would remain.